Continuing at the tour, the next siman deals with shechita, and it starts by talking about showing the knife to the chacham, which is not an essential part of shechita, and moving the knife for anything other than shechita is a problem of muktzah. Now we know there's the machlokas between the Ri and Reb Shimon, Rebi'udah and Reb Shimon as to whether there is muktzah on Yom Tov or not. Everyone agrees there are the more serious categories of muktzah, but the lighter categories of muktzah, Reb Shimon says, do not apply. So there are 9 categories of muktzah. Some of them apply, some of them don't. We'll get more into this when we get to muktzah on Yom Tov. But for a brief summary of those, there's muktzah machmas chesaron kis. There's muktzah because I'm afraid this is such a valuable thing, I only use it for one thing. Kli shemalachta l'isser, something like a hammer that I use for driving in the nail, which is prohibited on Shabbos. Kli shavur, a broken kli that's no longer usable. Basis l'muktzah, that became muktzah because it was holding something that was muktzah bein hashmashos at the beginning of Shabbos. Something that is not fit for any use at all. Davar she'eino muchan, something that is not ready to be used or wasn't ready bein hashmashos. Muktzah machmas mius, something that's muktzah because it's disgusting, and nolad, and something that came into being on Yom Tov itself. So anything that I could do before Yom Tov, I should have done then. So I could have taken the knife to the chacham to check before. Since I didn't do it, I can check it myself. Every shochet checks the knife themselves anyway, and he could slaughter with it. I'm not going to go into all of the various things. When I'm slaughtering a bird or a wild animal on Yom Tov, I have to do kisui dam. I have to cover the blood, and I have to have dirt that's ready for this. But a koi or a kvi, there's a machlokas as to what the proper pronunciation of this animal is. It's an animal that has some of the signs of behema and some of the signs of a chaya. The Gemara says a behema has a horn, and it doesn't have any furry growth on it. And a chaya has an antler, meaning it's broken into many parts. And it does have this growth on it. So, however, the koi has one of each, meaning it grows a horn, but it does have the mossy growth on it. The only animal, to my knowledge, that fits these requirements is the buffalo. There may be others I don't know about. But I cannot slaughter it on Yom Tov because I don't know whether it requires kisui dam or not, and moving the dirt would be prohibited if I'm not doing it to fulfill a mitzvah. That's siman tav tzadi ches. Siman tav tzadi tes talks about processing parts of the animal, like a stomach, to turn into a water bag or something like that, that are not for food, and it's not necessary to get the food out. For instance, I have to skin the animal simply to get the meat of it out, so I'm allowed to do that on Yom Tov. I'm allowed to do this first stages of preserving the hide, otherwise no one would slaughter the animal. But for these secondary things, they can either be done later, or I can lose the small value in that, and that's not a problem, because I'm only allowed to do those malachas on Yom Tov that I'm going to have a benefit of on Yom Tov, and it's for food. Other things I would not be allowed to do. Siman tav kuf. Ein konin baser mehatabach bepisup damim. You're not allowed to buy meat from a butcher with a set saying the amount of money being used for it. She'amar lo tenli besela or בשתים. Give me a seilah's worth of meat or 2 slime worth of meat. ושלא יאמר לו הריני שותף עמך בסלע, or I'll be a partner with you with the seilah's worth of meat of this animal when you slaughter it. אלא מחלק להם שלישיות or רביעיות וכפי החלקים שדרך לחלק. בעיר, below פיסוק דמים. But you divide it up into quarters, thirds, whatever is the normal custom in the city, and without saying what the price is going to be. Umevii shnei behemos, I bring two animals, ויאמר zu kazu, and we say that these are very similar animals. ולמחר samim הנשארת, and the next day we can evaluate the other animal, the remaining animal, וכפי ששוה כך יפרע, and according to what the other animal is worth, that's what this person will have to pay. That's what the person pays for it. Aser לשקול basar. We continue, you're not allowed to weigh meat. Afilu litno bekaf moznaim l'shomro min hakbarim, or even to put it on the scale to preserve it from the mice is prohibited. Im hi teluya bimkom shiragilim lishkol ba mipnei shenirei kashokel. If it's standing in the normal place where it is to use to weigh things with, because it looks like he's weighing. Vaser lishkol mana keneged mana. I'm not allowed to take a weight of a mana in one hand and weigh out a mana's worth of meat in my other. Or b'mayim, or using water. Kagon shenosin mayim bekli v'nosin ba chaticha. I put water in the kli and I put the meat in the kli. Then I put water in a bucket and I drop my steak in there. Lefi shemasha olin hamayim yodea kama yesh b'chasicha, because based upon how much the water rises, I'll know how large this piece is. Mutter lishkol biyado. But I can just hold something in my hand and figure, well, this is about half a pound. And he evaluates, he holds it in his hand, he says, this is about this weight. And an expert butcher, a professional butcher can't do this because this is essentially like weighing on the scale for him. Kasav Rashba, the Rashba writes, L'chora nira de kol ze lo ayri ela belokeach min hatabach, or b'shnei shtuk b'mcholikim b'neihem. This appears only when I'm talking about two people buying from a butcher, or two people dividing up an animal that they own in partnership. Aval lishkol b'beiso leida kama yivashal mutter. But in your house, to measure the meat, to know how much you have to cook, to know how much you have to put in the cholent, that would be mutter. However, concerning measuring flour, you're not allowed to take a cup of flour on Yom Tov. Einosin base yad bebaser perush lenokvo litlosbo. I'm not allowed to make a hole in the meat to hang it by. V'davka b'sakin, and this is only if I use a knife to do it. Avol biyad mutter, but I'm allowed to use my hand to make this hole. Lasosbo siman mutter afilu b'sakin, and to make a sign on the meat so we know it's kosher and another piece, especially if I'm sending it from one to a person that needs it. I'm allowed to do this even with a knife. Molgin harosh ve'aglaim barotchim kedei lahasir asar. I'm allowed to boil the head and the legs in boiling water in order to remove the hair. Umahavin osabur. I'm allowed to singe it with flame. Aval ein tofli noso besid, but I'm not allowed to use chemicals to remove it. Velo bacharsis, these are different chemicals. Because all of these things look like I'm tanning the hide. Vein gozin osam misparaim, and I'm not allowed to cut the hair off with scissors or shears. Shenire ka'ose l'tzorach ar, because it looks like I'm doing this because I need the hair, which is like gozis etzemer, when the shearing a sheep, which is a malacha deraisa. I'm allowed to do malicha on many pieces of meat at one time, even though I only need one, because I could use any one of them. Any one of them was fit for me to use. As long as any one is fit for me to use, therefore I can do them all, and then afterwards decide which piece I want to use. All right, Siman Tav Kuf Aleph. This is another one that is not so common for us to do. I don't think anyone does it anymore. I am not allowed to chop wood from beams that are waiting to be used in construction. Afilu Reb Shimon, even according to Reb Shimon. V'lo me'akore shenishbara b'yom tov the Rabbi Yehuda, and I'm not allowed to cut up a beam that broke on Yom Tov according to Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Shimon mutter, but according to Reb Shimon, this is mutter because it was eino mina muncha, and it wasn't prepared before Yom Tov to use, but that's a lower level of muktzah, and Rabbi Shimon would allow that on Yom Tov. Im haya re'uya v'karov hu shetishaber, if it was in bad shape and it was ready to break. V'im eina re'uya, but if it wasn't fit, it wasn't bad, it wasn't in bad shape, we didn't think it was going to break. Afilu Reb Shimon moda, even Reb Shimon would admit that such a thing would be muktzah. V'im nishmara me'erev Yom Tov, and if it broke before Yom Tov, you're allowed to chop wood from it for you to use for your fire. When you chop wood, you can only use a kupitz, and we don't really know what this is, as we'll see in a minute. And with the short side of it, but not with the wide side. It has two cutting edges. Echad katzer ve'echad rachav. One is wide and one is narrow. Ve'rachav dome lechas uman, and the wide side looks like a craftsman's way of doing things, and therefore that would be prohibited. Ubekordum, and using a kordum, a mattock, afilu b'tzad hakatzar asur, even the short side is prohibited. V'ken lo b'magal, and so too not with a scythe for cutting grain with. V'lo b'magira, and not with the magira, which is another type of knife. B'sefer mitzvos asur gam b'kupitz, and the sefer mitzvos prohibits us also from using a kupitz. The fisha einana became mahu kupitz, because today we're no longer experts in exactly what this Talmudic kli was. V'lo hitir ela b'sakin, and the only way you can do it is with a knife. Ve'afilu bikua b'kupitz lo shari ela b'koreh gedola. And when did we allow you to chop things, even with a kupitz or with anything else? It was only when we had a very big beam. Tf shari lahasika below bikua, where it was impossible to put it in my oven to fire without chopping it up first. Aval eitzim shel hasaka gedola ketzaz ve'rulim lahasaka below bikua. But if they're just a little bit larger than normal, and they will fit inside my oven, my stove that I need on Yom Tov to cook with, lo yivakem klal, then I'm not allowed to cut them at all, because I can put them in and use them as they are. Kevin she'efshar lasikam below bikua, because I can use them without chopping. Aval l'shavram biyad, to break them with my hand, they're really rotten. Yirei mi perush Rashi, shemuter, it appears from Rashi's commentary that with I'm not using a kli, then I could break it up even if it would fit as it is. Avo malashon aviyad ni harosh sal yirei diafilu l'shavram biyad nami aser. But according to the Torah says, my father, my lord, the Rosh, even breaking them with the hand would be prohibited. But tov lahachmer, and it's good to be strict according to the Rosh and not be lenient like Rashi. Ein mevim eitzin elamin hamuchunasin shebekarf af hasamuch lira. You're only allowed to bring wood from the area immediately surrounding the city. Betoch arba amos v'dalat tefachim. It has to be within 70 amos and 4 tefachim. So I would say this is, according to the Chazon Ish, this is something like 141 feet. According to Reb Chaim Noah, it's 106 feet, something like that. Ve'afilu ein lo potchos, or sheyesh lo potchos, even if it doesn't have any openings to it, or if it does, afilu b'sof ha'tuchum, the end of the tuchum, the end of this measure, avomina sedei, but from the open field, afilu mechunasim or fuzurim, afilu min karka if ein mavim. Then, even if it's in the area close to the city, even if they're gathered in one place in the field, you don't do it. Meaning they have to be set aside already and stacked in a place close to the city, in something that's used for holding firewood, for us to be able to take from it on Yom Tov. Even if I made a stack in the field, that's not considered setting it aside enough that I would be able to use such a thing on Yom Tov. Ale kanim ve'ale gefanim, the leaves of reeds and of vines. Afilu kansam me'esmol, even if I gathered them yesterday, chashivi k'mevuzarim, they're still considered as if they're scattered. Mipnei she'ruach mefazran, because the wind will scatter them all over the place. Elim kan hiniach aleichem kli me'esmol, unless I put something on them yesterday to gather them up. Those people who lived in the Midwest, the East Coast, not Southern California, where you have leaves fall in the fall and you have to rape them up. No, if you don't bag them quickly, next day you're going to have to start all over again. Shelo yifazrim hurach. So if you put a kli on them, the wind won't scatter them, and then it would be known that I set them aside for this. When I'm gathering in my courtyard wood so that I can burn it on Yom Tov, lo yaseh mehem tzibor. I can't make a tzibor. I can't make a tie them up together. Ela yavi me'at v'yisrof. If I'm doing it on Yom Tov, I have to bring a few and burn them. V'yachzor v'yav me'at v'yisrof, and then another few and burn it. Meaning, the Chachamim allowed us to do certain things for cooking on Yom Tov, and other things they prohibited. They prohibited harvesting for anything that was done a large amount at one time. They prohibited. They only allowed us to do those things that are done normally in the house, for one day, not the harvest and so on. So if I'm filling up my wood box in my house, in my courtyard, that's already a lot of work, and it could be for several days. It's unclear what it is. So I can only bring what I need right now, and when this is burning out, then I can go and get something more. I can't just gather a whole lot of this at one time. Eitzim shenisharu min ha'ilan b'yom tov, limbs of a tree that fall off on Yom Tov, ein masikin behem. You're not allowed to use them for your fire on Yom Tov. V'im nisharu l'toch hatanur, yispar b'din hatanur be'ezosem. And if they fell into the oven and so on, then we'll discuss that later on. Ud shu eitz shemechatin bo ha'esh v'nishbur b'yom tov, a piece of wood that I'm using for stirring the coals and it broke on Yom Tov. Ein mesikin bo l'ri mipnei shu shever kli. I'm not allowed to burn it or do anything else with it on Yom Tov, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because it's a broken kli, and the broken kli is a type of muktzah that even on Yom Tov he would not allow you to use, whereas according to Reb Shimon, such a thing would be allowed to be used. Asur lahasip b'yom tov sheni shel Rosh Hashanah halapidim shekavu b'yom tov rishon. I cannot, on the second day of Yom Tov, fire from the torches of the first day of Yom Tov. V'ken b'chol Yom Tov she'achar Shabbos, and so too on every Yom Tov after Shabbos, asur lahasik ba'osan shekavu b'Shabbos. I can't use the coals that were made from the fires that went out on Shabbos, or on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Elim kem yarbe aleihem eitzim acherim v'vatlim. Unless I put a lot more wood here to be mevatel, to make into vatlim brov, that I have much more of the new stuff than I had of the old stuff. Ubevad shlo yiga behem, as long as you don't touch them, move them around, because you're not allowed to move muktzah. Ad achar shitbatlu barov, until they are a minority of the wood in the wooden coals in the oven. Ubashar yom tov mutter, and on all other yom tovim it's mutter, meaning on the first day. For the first day you could, on the second day you could, because the second day is d'Rabbanan, whereas the first day of the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are yom harichtahu, so it would have a different halacha. We will pick up from here in the next shiur.